So, welcome viewers to our next episode of Future of Work, where we've been speaking to various HR leaders from across geographies, industries to understand what their perspective is on the future of work. As we come towards the close of 2022 and beginning of 2023, it'll be interesting for us to explore some of these aspects and particularly to see what are some of those trends that may influence the workplace of the future as we step into 2023. My guest today is Nakisha Griffin. She's the head HR of Neustar Security Services. Nakisha, really nice to have you with us here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Nakisha, post the pandemic, a lot of things have changed from a workplace standpoint. Hybrid models are coming to picture. So, what are some of the trends, the emerging trends of the workplace that you see that organizations should be focused as we step into 2023?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's interesting because we're at almost year 3 of the pandemic, and a lot of the trends that started during the pandemic, and even though we're at our new normal, they've continued, right? So when I talk to people in the workplace that want to either come on board or, doing retention efforts, one thing I believe that's here to stay is remote work. As you've seen in the news with Twitter and various other companies that are urging their employees to come back, employees are resigning. Yeah. And that's something that you typically don't really see during the start of a recession. But there's options out here, and that has become a critical point of motivational things that employees want. So I feel like we think about the workplace and things that are here to stay, that hybrid, that remote workforce is here to stay. And as someone that, heavily focuses on talent acquisition, in the cybersecurity realm, where turnover can be 30%, or at least we think about last year's 30%, finding those STEM candidates, those candidates with 10 to 15 years of experience, or even at this point, it's hard to find entry level. We need to be able to differentiate ourselves to be employers of choice. So that's one thing that I'm glad that my organization does and does well, is encourage remote work, but it can be very hard in organizations that are trying to bring employees back. It's just, it's hard.
True. That's a very valid point that you made up, right? And it kind of puts the leaders also in a dilemma, managers also in a dilemma. They need to get work delivered. They are facing certain challenges managing these workforce remotely. But it's also important for them to understand that, like you rightly said, it's here to stay. So what do you think would be the impact of this on how managers go about managing their teams?
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that about how managers can manage their teams, because even though this is our lives for the past 3 years, managers still struggle with wanting to manage their employees in person. They still struggle with the idea of, I can't see employees. And those managers, they really need training. They need to be able to, and I find that it's not so much the, I can't see you, so I don't know what you're, so I don't know if I'm training you right, but I can't see you. So I don't know if you're doing the work. And that goes back to the culture, right? So if you want to have a culture that's going to thrive today, you need to make sure that your managers are aligned with that culture. And that comes from training. So managerial training is going to be a big aspect. And then as HR professionals, what we can do, something really, 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 really easy, is just set up structure for the managers. How should they do check-ins? When should you appraise performance? What should you, giving them tools that make it easier to do what they would have done in the in-person setting. And it sounds so simple, but it's very, very rarely done.
Yeah, I think sometimes, the simple things are the most difficult ones to crack.
It is.
Right.
It is.
So,
my gosh.
Yeah. So there is a complete transition that's happening, right? So not only with respect to how the workplaces operate, some of the new roles which are emerging out there, or even the demography of the the workforce which is coming in, right? So you have the millennials, you have Gen Zs, you have all these different mix which is coming into the picture. So what are some challenges as HR professionals that you would see during this transition period?
I love that you had that question. It's one that I was thinking about last week. Funny enough, this time last week, it's like, you're in the workforce and you have Gen Z all the way to boomers, and everyone, their values are different, right? And one thing that a lot of HR professionals try to do is they try to find, okay, where is the intersection? And I don't do that. I believe that we need to find what people value and just infuse it. So rather us having, okay, we all, everyone's different. You could be a boomer and still have Gen Z values. It's finding those values, infusing them in your organization, and really working with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging to make sure that those values are represented. I'll give you an example. As a consultant a few years ago, the company I worked for, they were very, very, they had this mind frame that employees only stay because of good managers. And during my interviews with employees, I found out that over 50% of their employees are money motivated. And they were very clear to tell me that they've had horrible managers, but they were making 50% more. And that was their motivation. So it's little things like that about finding out what your employees value and then bringing that back and saying that, okay, your top performer of the 50% of people that value money, 25% of them are your top performers. You're valuing the wrong thing for this subset. I'm not saying that having a good manager is not important. It is. But when you think about the hierarchy of values, are you really looking at what your employees want? And also, it's funny, do you really want to hear it? Because a lot of employers don't want to hear, oh, we need to pay our people more. They don't want to hear that. They want an easy qualitative fix. And it's not always going to be like that.
True. No, that was very rightly said, because sometimes you are not open to listening to what your employees really want. And I think moving forward, that's the most important factor if you need to really thrive as a organization. One other aspect that I wanted to look at is, especially when we talk about Gen Z workforce coming to the picture as well, right? So they look at a lot more of ownership, a lot more of what's the purpose behind what we are doing among these other aspects. And also they would probably look at a lot more of transparency in the way responsibilities are given or recognition is given to them among others. So how do you see the entire concept of objectives and key results, or OKRs, which now keeps popping up in a lot of HR conversations? How do you see that playing a key role in during this entire transition and towards a new workplace that we would be entering into?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because when you roll out initiatives, right? And I may think as a millennial, that's the best initiative ever, right? But my Gen Z daughter will be like, well, we don't want that. We want we want snacks in the office. Your company doesn't have a TikTok. It's little things, and I mentioned that because little things like that, when you're rolling out initiatives, or when you're looking at the Gen Z population, we as HR leaders, unfortunately, we are very fixated in the millennial group. We don't, that's the broader part of the workforce. We're fixed on what they need. We're fixed on now, when I first came in the workforce, they would call the boomers, or the sandwich generation, take care of our parents and now our children. And that has become the millennials to an extent. And we focus all of our rewards on this group. And we look at Gen Z as we used to for the millennials, right? And I want to pause there because I want to go back to something that I think is very, very important, is that these groups that we have, Gen Z, millennials, baby boomers, and Gen X, they're groups and they move as age changes. So in theory, we're looking at our younger workers, our mid-career workers, and our older workers. And it's just, the groups are just intertwiningly changing as time goes on. So the real question isn't so much about these groups, it's really about how are we rewarding? What are we doing to motivate and retain our key employees that are young, that are mid-career, and that are more senior in their career? Do we know what they want? Have we done a survey? Are we just really focused on what we think that they should want from research? Because research is not always going to be the answer.
True.
Talk to your people. One thing that I found as a HR professional is that I want to hear what you have to say, but I'm also going to tell you if we can do it or not. And a lot of people say you're opening up Pandora's box by saying, hey, what do you want? And then telling them, no, you can't have it. And that's not necessarily the case. We need to know as HR leaders what our people want. And we need to figure out first, can we get it? And if not, why? What are the constraints? And then look at it as if we don't deliver what our people really need to be successful in our organization, to be connected, why aren't we willing to do so?
Very interesting. Very interesting. I like how you say, they're really apprehensive of opening up the Pandora's box, but I think without that, you will not be ready, for the future workplace that way.
You have to cause chaos in the workplace. If you're not willing to cause chaos as the head of HR, then you don't really need to be the head of HR.
True.
We're not here anymore for the standstill. We're here to really transform and to make people uncomfortable in our leadership team. In order to really be the voice for employees. We're not here anymore to push the paper. We're here to start some chaos and make some changes and ruffle some feathers and make sure our employees are taken care of.
True. And in this entire changes that's happening and this transition that's happening right now, what do you see the role of technology acting as an enabler for HR leaders?
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I had a call yesterday about automating things. When you think about HR, we need to automate and really embrace technology and automate as much as we can, so we can be those change aids, we can be those disruptors, we can be those business partners that our company needs. We don't need to be behind the scenes doing tactical work. We need to minimize as much, and I'm not going to say that we're going to have no tactical work. We're going to have it, but we need to minimize as much as we can, so that we are having meetings with leaders, that we are talking to teams, that we are finding out that we're active in our communities, and we're finding out how to best motivate our employees, that we're staying on top of trends. Our work needs to be 80% on strategy as leaders of HR and 20% technical. So technology needs to be something that we are relying on, and I use that word reliance. People hate reliance, but I use it. We need to rely on technology to help us drive results. So the more that we know about trends, and especially me in the cybersecurity currently, I need to stay abreast of what my company is doing and how I can also streamline my own department.
True. So I think you touched upon some really interesting topics as we move forward into 2023. But to summarize, I think some of the key learnings which I got in this conversation is one, that knowing the pulse of the employees and giving them voice to really say what's going to motivate them is very important for organizations. Two, I think HR leaders' role will be to be a lot more disruptors, transformers, make leadership uncomfortable with asking them those questions, showing them that data, and using technology in all this to kind of leapfrog forward and be future ready as an organization. So Nakisha, loved our conversation. Thanks once again for sharing your views with us. It was really nice having you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.